Welcome back to Mathematical Economics class. So in this class, I'll be showing you how to derive variable cost and fixed cost from total cost function. So let's take a look at this example. If the total cost of a firm is given as this, in other words, the total cost function of a firm, is given as this, TC equals 40 plus 3Q squared minus Q raised to power 3. Derive the firm's 1. Fixed cost, 2. Variable cost. So here is the solution. So how do we derive the fixed cost? So fixed cost is that part of total cost that does not depend on Q. So in other words, we can say that fixed cost is equals to total cost when Q equals 0. If we agree that fixed cost is part of total cost that does not depend on Q, it means that even if no unit of output is produced, the firm is expected to incur fixed cost. That's what it means, because it does not depend on the unit of output produced. So that total cost at Q equals 0 represent our fixed cost. So in other words, you recall that total cost function here is 40 plus 3Q raised to power 3 minus Q 3Q raised to power 2, minus 3 minus Q raised to power 3. So in other words, we said when Q is equal to 0, okay, so we say TC equals what? 40 plus 3 by 0 square minus 0 raised to power 3. In other words, we have 40. Okay, so in other words, we have our FC equals 40. So this is our fixed cost. So if you watch the previous video, we said fixed cost is that part of total cost that is constant, that does not depend on the unit of output produced or sold. Okay, you can see that mere looking at this total cost function, you can see that the only constant you have there is 40, and that's your fixed cost. You can see that's what we later got here as our fixed cost. So that is the fixed cost. So we know that the other part represents our variable cost. In other words, question 2 says, what is the variable cost? So variable cost is that part that depends on unit of output. Okay, so meaning that we know that total cost is equal, the total cost generally is equal to total fixed cost, or if you like, fixed cost plus variable cost. Okay, fixed cost plus variable cost. So we already know our fixed cost and we are looking for variable cost. So we can make this cost subject, variable cost the subject formula here. So we have VC equals TC minus FC. Okay. In other words, we can go back here. We say our VC equals the total cost. What is our total cost? We insert the function here, that is 40 plus 3Q squared minus Q raised to power 3. Then minus FC. What's our FC that we got the other time? We got minus 40. Okay. So in other words, this 40 here we cancel out this. So our VC plus 3Q squared minus Q raised to power 3. Now this is equivalent to this part that depends on Q.